Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today we're going to be reviewing Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan. This is the penultimate Robert Jordan book in the Wheel of Time, the 10th book in total in the Wheel of Time. We've got we've got 4 books and 1 novella, prequel novel. It's not like super short. I've read shorter full-length novels. That's New Spring. That's actually what we're reading next. But so yeah, Crossroads of Twilight. I think we need to frame this book a little bit to start with. So this review is going to be a non-spoiler. I do wonder how many people a non-spoiler review of book 10 in a series is serving. Possibly later in the video we'll switch over into spoilers. Though I do have a full spoiler discussion with Matt from Bask in the Story that will be going up next week. Now, let's talk a little bit about Crossroads of Twilight. This is the least liked Wheel of Time book. It is what many people think of as the true peak of the slog. The worst book in the series is the twilight of the soul for Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time. There's a lot of things, I think, a lot of factors that come together here to make this book disappointing to many, and including that many myself. I'll tell you up front that I ended up rating this one as a 3-star. I initially, when I finished the book and put it down, I was like, do I want to rate this as a 4-star? Like basically all of the Wheel of Time books have been a 4 or 5 for me. And I was thinking to myself, do I want to rate this as a 4-star? And then it came to me that actually, if I really think about it, many parts of this book dragged it down to the point where I wouldn't feel comfortable, I don't think, rating it as a 4. So why is this book the least liked? So I think one of the big characteristics of the slog, and the slog is the portion of Wheel of Time that people think is slow and boring and weak. The big characteristic of the slog is focus away from Rand, the quote-unquote protagonist, main character, lead character of the Wheel of Time. I don't know whether Rand actually is the protagonist. He's a really interesting character, and I think that we've actually not really seen much of Rand. I mean, he's barely in this book. You could count the pages that he's on in this book on 2 hands, probably. He's referenced a lot, obviously. He's incredibly important. One of the big things with the slog that people don't like is the absence of fan favourite characters. Many of the books feature little to no Rand or Matt, who are kind of the 2 favourite characters. There's a perception of, I believe, a diminishing of other characters like Perrin that fans really liked. And I will say, I feel like Perrin has kind of been on a downward trend through these books. There is some really good Perrin stuff at the end of this book, but you do have to read, 500 pages to get there, which is actually pretty disappointing. The pacing of these books is not great. I had some minor issues with book 5, I think, was the first one where I felt it wasn't as good as the previous book. The big thing in book 5 was Jordan obviously really liked and wanted to spend a lot of time at Vale and Luca's travelling menagerie. And I just did not care for that plotline. I just didn't think it was that interesting. So we spent all this time in Vale and Luca's travelling menagerie. And that was a big reason why I didn't like book 5 as much as books 4 and 6. Book 6 is really interesting because you spend a lot more time with the female characters, and I think the perception by many Wheel of Time fans is that many of the female characters are more supporting characters than they are main or lead characters. I definitely would disagree with that. I feel like characters like Egwene and maybe to a lesser extent Nynaeve and Elaine, but Egwene most certainly feels like a really major and important character in the series, especially now. The book actually ends on a cliffhanger that is all Egwene related. And then you also have people who consider, I think a lot of people, myself included, would say that the pacing is not always right in these books. They feel very episodic, but it also, looking back over the slog, I feel like you probably could have, if you look at, so I think Path of Daggers, was that the last one? I can't remember which one's which. Path of Daggers, Winter's Heart, and Crossroads of Twilight. I feel like you could edit all three of those down into one absolutely killer book. You could keep all the farm-adding stuff, which was excellent in Winter's Heart. You could keep the Bowl of the Winds stuff in Path of Daggers. You could keep Soul Harbour, and you could keep the Matt stuff in this book. But I do feel that the way that Jordan has specifically written and paced this book in particular is the reason why people like it the least. Jordan has been doing this thing for the last few books where each book, like I was saying, they feel a bit more episodic. They feel more like a TV, not even season, like an episode of TV, like you're dropping in on a character for a few chapters and then you're off to the next character. And it doesn't feel like a season where you have that full arc. It feels like a single episode of Game of Thrones where you're dropping in, you're getting the latest update on what a character is doing, you're getting maybe, an interesting conversation or a thrilling fight scene, but you might not be getting anything that feels like it's moving the plot along. And in fact, this book really doesn't feel like it has much that is furthering the main antagonist, the main story, the War of the Light. So this is actually so there's the previous book in the series, Path of Daggers. There's an interesting thing in the what would normally be like the big conclusion where everyone bands together to use the Bowl of the Winds happens in the first 30% of the book, and then the rest of the book is like aftermath of that, but there's no like big event. And then Path of Daggers is the first book in the entire series where there is no major step in the War of the Light. So the Forsaken don't make a major move against. No, it's Winter's Heart. Sorry, I think is the one that doesn't have this. There's no move made against our heroes. There's no move made by our heroes against the bad dudes, and that's a big thing in the previous book. So I've realised I spent 9 minutes talking about the slog and my thoughts on the slog, but I do feel like in order to discuss Crossroads of Twilight, you kind of need to think about that. So, especially because this is a non-spoiler discussion, as I've said before, the events of the previous books, like the major events, are kind of things I'm going to discuss, but I'm not going to go out and spoil this book or be like, and then this person killed this person in book 6 or something, But where do we find our characters when we open this book? So the end of Winter's Heart, was it Winter's Heart? Yes, End of Winter's Heart. And this is, if you have not read any of these books, you don't want to know that this happens in Winter's Heart. So here's your warning. In Winter's Heart, at the end, Rand and Nynaeve, using the Angreal, Terangreal, Sat-Angreal, whatever that is, using the gadgets, cleanse the male half of the power. So previously the male half of the power was tainted, and the taint on the male half of the power, was sending men who could channel mad. And the more they touched the power, the more they went mad. And so Rand, who is recruiting men who can channel, turns out there's a lot of people going mad around Rand, and it's not like a set thing, of course, as well. It's not like, you use the power 100 times and you go mad. It's some people start going mad right away, some people it takes years, some people it takes months. So the unpredictability of it, the kind of inhumanity of it, and that sort of thing, a really interesting concept, that the male half has this taint on it, especially when the female half of the power is shown to be so powerful in so many ways, and the male half in many ways is more powerful but maybe a little less controllable. So there's a lot going on with the cleansing of the power, and somebody had told me in the comments that the Crossroads of Twilight is essentially the like fallout, and like seeing where every character is after the male half of the source has been cleansed. And while a good chunk of the book is that, one of the big issues with this book is that it's kind of, a lot of it is taking place while Winter's Heart is taking place. So a lot of it is taking place, and then like somewhere during the chapters, for example, say we have like 4 chapters from Elaine's perspective. I mean, we do actually have that, but we have 4 chapters or so from Elaine's perspective or whatever. And then like in the final of those 4, she'll be like, and I felt a disturbance in the power far off to the north. And like, it's like, well, okay, so what that means is that, we're not actually seeing the fallout or the change to the world that is promised by the ending of Winter's Heart. And I feel like what Jordan, if I don't like to say this is what this author should have done, and Jordan being a discovery writer, someone who does not plan intricately his books like an author like Brandon Sanderson does, because he's a discovery writer, I feel like he probably sat down to write Crossroads of Twilight and went, actually, I want to cover what Perrin, Matt and Elaine were doing in Winter's Heart. And because of that, I think we actually start this book off in not a great position. The timeline is also a bit confused as well, because Matt was in Winter's Heart, and we come to Matt at like the end of his story, but then not the end of his story. We come to Matt at the end of the Winter's Heart story, rather than Elaine and Perrin, who we come to much earlier. And it's hard as well, because I really wanted to see more of the like fallout from the healing of the male half of the source, and we just don't get it. We get it from a few people, but like I would have loved to have had a POV in the Black Tower when that happened, and it also seems to take a really long time. People are talking about it, and it's like, is that meant to be like aftershocks from an earthquake, or is that it actually took a long time, or all this sort of stuff? It's difficult to reconcile the end of Winter's Heart with the story of Crossroads of Twilight. The other big thing is like I said, the pacing I think is the worst part of this book, and is the thing that Jordan actively gets wrong. But I also think that it's his choice of where to place the chapters that the characters focus on. So most characters in this book will have multiple chapters, right? And you'll be like, right, I'm going to spend the next 3 chapters with Perrin. And then those 3 chapters will be like, Perrin does this one thing. The next thing is Perrin does something else. The next thing is Perrin is sad about XYZ. And then it will be like, right, now we're moving on. We're going to be with another character for 1 chapter or 6 or whatever. And what happens there is Jordan kind of front loads this book with the most boring chapters. So, as I said before, Perrin's kind of been going down in my estimation. He's been, ever since he had the like fake argument with Rand, which I want to say was like 2 books ago, and was sent off to find Masima, I have found his chapters to be less and less interesting as they go on. My big problem with Perrin is that most of the problems that Perrin is having in these books could be solved by Rand turning up and talking to somebody for 2 minutes. And not being able to solve a problem because one character is not there, especially a character who can instantaneously travel across the world, is quite frustrating. It's not up there with like, I can't tell you because I promised someone else that I can't share this secret, and that sort of irritating. But it is a bit disheartening that Perrin's problems are actually quite small and could be very easily solved by, Rand turning up for 2 minutes. And it's not like Rand is all that busy. I'm pretty certain he spent the entirety of this book like hanging out with Min. So yeah, difficult. It is honestly quite difficult to go too deep into this book without talking spoilers, but I actually think we can do it. I think we can nail it. So then we go on to Elaine. We go on to Fail for a chapter, and then we go on to Elaine. And one of the other big problems is these chapters are very long. They take like an hour to read. And if you, for example, are reading these Elaine chapters, there's like 4 or 5 Elaine chapters in a row. And they are all really nothingy. They could have been condensed into a single chapter. And coming off of the back of a single chapter from another point of view, from Fail's point of view, it really feels like we didn't need all of that. And this book isn't massively long. It's 600 and something pages, when many books in Wheel of Time are over 800 pages. I think the Shadow Rising, which is the longest book, is like 1,000 pages. But the problem that you have here is that Jordan is spending these 600 pages saying not a lot. I don't agree with the people who say that you could look up a 1-sentence Wikipedia summary of this book, because there is some really good stuff, especially in the second half. But the first half of this book, especially, also, I thought the prologue was one of the weakest ones Jordan has put together. I don't like, in previous prologues we've seen like the coup inside the White Cloaks. We've seen all these big events, and then this is a bit nothingy again. Like Dobrain getting stabbed, not particularly exciting or interesting. And then, as you follow through the book, you get some really good Egwene stuff. I think Egwene and the second go around with Perrin's chapters does really save this book. So Egwene, the political stuff and manoeuvrings and machinations and things that are going on in her camp and in Elida, in the White Tower with Elida, and Alviarin are really good. There is a specific chapter from Alviarin's point of view, which is probably my favourite one in the book. I really loved that one. And then also we've got the chapter with Perrin at So Harbour, and I loved that. Robert Jordan is really, really good when he decides he wants to go and dip his toe into horror, and like he really nails that like real sharp bowstring tension of horror when you know something bad is going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. He's really absolutely fantastic at that like creepy feeling. He's able to line up all of these like clues and hints that something horrible is happening. And this book has possibly the best example of it. But one of the problems, not all the problems, but I do wish that we'd gotten much more of that, much less of the Perrin from early on in the book. And the Elaine chapters were the Elaine chapters could have been cut out and replaced with, what have you been up to, Elaine? Oh, I was doing this. And I would imagine that many of those storylines that have been started in this book will probably be wrapped up next book, because Jordan thought that he was going to be writing a 12-book series. So when he handed his notes over to Sanderson, he had planned for one more book. Sanderson ended up having to write 3 to fulfill all of Jordan's ideas. But I do imagine we're going to see a lot of storylines wrapping up in Knife of Dreams, and because in Jordan's mind, the next book was going to be The Last Battle. So, you know, something to think about there. I'm really excited to read Knife of Dreams. People have told me it's Jordan's best book, that he goes out with a bang, and that, you know, he really tees a lot of things up, which is excellent, and that it's like the bombastic return to form, and many people's, you know, favourite books, often in the top 5s. So yeah, really looking forward to reading Knife of Dreams. I am reading New Spring first, which is not meant to be as good. Yeah, so this is a really confusing book to talk about, because it ends on a couple of things that I really enjoyed. I really liked the Egwene stuff at the end of the book. I really liked the So Harbour stuff with Perrin. But I have to say, for the majority of the first half of this book, I had like one foot out the door. I ended up listening to this entire book, basically. I think I read the prologue, and I read maybe 1 or 2 chapters physically, and then 1 or 2 chapters on ebook, and then I switched to the audiobook while playing a puzzle game, and I didn't switch back. I literally listened to the entire thing. I went for a few long walks, but 90% of this book was listened to. And I do think that was a great way to get through this book, because in many of the times I wanted to read Wheel of Time, but this wasn't feeling like Wheel of Time to me, because it was just quite disappointing. So yeah, I guess that's probably a good place to leave this, to be honest. I don't think we need to actually go through a spoiler section, because I've already talked about the things that I love the most. I'm excited to see where we end up with Egwene and that big cliffhanger. And many people keep saying like, oh, The Last Battle, it's going to be really soon. But it's not. Robert, I've still got 4 more books to read. But yeah, I am really excited to get to the next one. I'm interested to see what Matt and I have to say when we end up talking about this. We'll be doing our spoiler discussion. We're filming it next week, and then don't know when I'll be posting it, but at some point. So let's end the video. What did you think of Crossroads of Twilight, if you read it? Is this your least favourite book in the Wheel of Time? Because it is mine. Despite it being a decent book, the pacing issues really ruined it for me. I ended up giving this a 3 stars. If the entire book had been like what the first half of the book was, this would have been a 2-star read for me, but the final high quality chapters ended up bumping it up a star. However, what would you rank it? What would you rate it? And if you like this video, make sure to give it a like. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I would love to have you as part of this lovely growing little community. After we finish reading Wheel of Time, we'll be moving on to Malazan, Book of the Fallen. So if you are up for that, let's talk in 4 months' time-ish. 3 months' time? 4 months' time, because I'm going to try and read New Spring and Knife of Dreams close together. I say this every time, but I really am going to try. And New Spring is very short. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will speak to you on Wednesday.